Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Bankrupt Hippo YouTube channel. My name is Bryce, and we're here to talk all about Handmaid's Tale, specifically Season 4, Episode 1. So the season premiere is finally here. In fact, I think Hulu's released the first 4 episodes. For those of you who are my bingers, probably way past the point of where I'm at in the series. Like I said, I've only watched Episode 1 up to this point, and I think that I'm going to do a video for each episode just to slowly digest the season bit by bit so I can get the most enjoyment out of it possible. But whether or not you've already seen all 4 episodes or not, I'm just glad you're here, so welcome back. If you guys are curious to see what my thoughts were leading up to Season 4, I did just release a video on my YouTube channel and on my podcast pre-gaming Season 4, for lack of a better term, so feel free to check that out as well. So, Season 4, Episode 1, finally here. I got some of my questions answered that I had going into this season, including where do they take June? What do they do about her gunshot wound that she sustained in the Season 3 finale? Because from what I know about all the handmaids, I'm not sure how deep their network is, and especially in terms of medical help. And it turns out that in Season 4, it's actually pretty extensive. They start off the episode by carrying June to safety, and they started off the episode pretty hot. And what I mean by that is the fact that June is obviously bleeding out from her gunshot wound. It's quite severe. The gunshot wounds are no small thing. So they find a flare, Janine lights it, and they gotta cauterize the wound to go ahead and close it up. And just seeing that scene, I was like, my heart started to hurt a little bit, because obviously that can't be a painless process. So they get June all good to go. They cauterize her and they carry her to safety, basically. And the episode kind of goes on from there. I'm going to kind of get this out of the way early on and preface this by saying this was actually probably my least favorite episode of The Handmaid's Tale that I've ever seen. But I want to be clear, I don't think it was a bad episode. I thought it was good. It's just there wasn't a whole lot that went on. It's kind of the fallout of the end of Season 3, so we basically see 2 things go on. 1, we see June recover from her gunshot wound, and 2, we see the aftermath of Commander Lawrence's choices to help June and the rest of the handmaids, the Marthas and the children, escape. And we also figure out exactly how many people escaped in this episode. We figure out that at the Season 3 finale, 86 children ended up escaping, and I believe 9 Marthas, they said. So that's no small feat. So they got a pretty good chunk of people out. Adds a little bit more clarity into the gravity as to what June and the rest of the handmaids did. So good on them for that. I was super pumped to hear that number and hear that triumph for them. So basically, after they get June all cleared up, they say that the handmaids claim that they have a place where they can all safely congregate and hide out. And they get to this point, and by now June still doesn't look quite too good, and it turns out that she became septic. So basically she spends an extended period, they don't really say for how long, it's implied that it's probably a few months, because the seasons change between when she becomes, I believe they said, septic, and when she actually recovers and is back outside. It goes from like snowy Boston to like nice warm summer Boston. Everybody's outside gardening when she wakes up, and things are green. So like that's really the only indicator that we have. So it's implied that June's recovering for some time, and when she comes out, we get a little bit more information about where exactly they are. And it turns out that they're actually at a, for lack of a better term, rogue commander's house. Now I'm going to tread that very lightly, because I think the commander is senile in some way. I don't think he's got quite all of his wits about him. The commander is Commander Keyes, and we get introduced to him a little bit in the episode, and also his wife, Mrs. Keyes, who is, I think, only 14 years old, which, again, this is kind of reiterating the fuckery of the situation, for lack of a better term, the messed up ideals that Gilead has, where they're marrying off children to people. They just shouldn't be marrying off people like that. But you kind of get that reminder when you meet Mrs. Keyes of what exactly June is fighting for. She's fighting for more than just her escape. She's fighting to free not only herself, but all the other children of Gilead and all the other women of Gilead who are being essentially held prisoner by this terrible, terrible place. So we kind of get, as an audience, we get reframed into reminding ourselves, like, hey, this is what June's fighting for. She's not only fighting for herself, but she's fighting for something bigger. And that keeps getting built upon as the seasons go on. She's had multiple opportunities now to escape if she wanted to. Every time she's chosen not to because she is trying to help someone or some others. First, it's her daughter, Hannah, and then it's groups of people, and now it just the groups keep getting larger, and she wants to do something about it. So it shows her character growth, and also gives us that little bit of reminder of meeting Mrs. Keys. And when we first meet Mrs. Keys at this point, I was really worried that we were gonna get like a cliche young character who's trying to just act like an adult but doing so in a pompous way, if that makes any sense. So I was really worried that Mrs. Keys wasn't going to be a strong character. She came off really cruel. She's she just wasn't good. She's basically, I mean, June literally just gets out of bed after being septic. Like that's like a near death experience, and she's basically busting June's balls and saying, "Hey, like if you weren't going to fight and try to get free Gilead, why even get out of bed?" And June's like, "Jesus, I just fucking woke up, you know?" And we don't really get the closure into why Mrs. Keys is being like that, and it keeps getting further. For example, Mrs. Keys makes Janine eat a pig that Janine grew a bond closer with, which that's kind of a more of a comical relief element in this episode. Before that point, Janine basically, while her time on at Commander Keys' house, befriends this pig almost as like a pet. At one point, she even says, "Oh, don't worry, it's not your fault. You're not a dog." Like it's something you have to watch the episode to really get a feel for. And it's Janine really serves as the comic relief in this one that I really appreciated. But nevertheless, she befriends this pig. Well, at the end of the day, they have to slaughter this pig because how else does everybody? How else is everybody going to sustain themselves and survive unless they eat? So Jeannie obviously isn't comfortable with eating this pig. They're passing her around at the table, and Mrs. Keys essentially makes Janine take a piece of this pig, put it in her mouth, and then she like covers her mouth and makes her swallow it. And June is finally like, "Mrs. Keys, what the hell is wrong with you?" And at this point, we get to the most difficult, I think, difficult part of the episode to really watch and hear, as Mrs. Keys basically reveals, because keep in mind, she's only like 14, 15 years old, that Commander Keys basically wasn't capable of creating children, so he had other commanders, other eyes come over and do terrible things to her, which is just absolutely awful. But we get that reminder of why June is fighting for the freedom of all of these women and children of Gilead, and also that um also that even the wives, even people in high positions in Gilead are experiencing pain too, just like Mrs. Keys is, even though she is the wife of a commander. So we really kind of get that additional perspective that a lot more areas are hurting than we think, and it serves to us as the audience and the reminder for June that she needed in order to keep going and to keep fighting even when it's getting really, really difficult. And with that, we also get some glimmers of hope in this episode. We get one in particular. June, the scene really didn't land for me because I couldn't tell what exactly June was feeling by the way she reacted. So at one point in the episode, June confronts Alma, and she's like, because after Mrs. Keys tells June what Commander Keys has been doing, she confronts Alma and says, "Hey, what the hell? You're supposed to be watching over Mrs. Keys. She's taking care of us. We need to take care of her back." And Alma is like, "We just didn't get in the way." And June's like, "Why is everybody being so complacent?" It's like Alma's coming from a place of complacency, and she says something along the lines of, "Let's just enjoy the freedom that we have on this farm because it's as free as we're going to get." And for me as an audience member, it really speaks to how valuable June is to not only the other handmaids, but to the freedom of Gilead in general, because June is a leader. She's willing to do things and continues to grow and learn and become more powerful. And she's willing to do and lead people who may not be courageous or optimistic enough yet to do so themselves. So it really shows that the handmaids really rely on June in order to kind of carry the torch and help them through hard times. So it really spoke to the power um that June has, and to me that just spoke volumes. But anyway, where I'm going with this is that June follows Alma into this really giant barn, and there we see everybody dancing, everybody having a good time, and we see that what do you call it? We see June kind of like break down almost at the sight of people having fun, which you would think that June would be like ecstatic that people can still have a life in Gilead, even if it's in secrecy, still some sort of semblance of a life. But she almost seems like really angry. And to me, it just kind of confused me. On one hand, I can understand it because it's showing that they're all complacent in where they're at and they're just trying to make the most of it. And that they're not looking for more. They're not reaching for more, and they're just okay with being in this terrible place. But on the other hand, it's confusing because it's like, okay, it's a step forward. It's better than being miserable all the time. So it's a very conflicting thing for us as the audience, and maybe it's a conflicting thing for June, and that's why I couldn't tell how she reacted. But it was just a really strange scene because it told me a little bit more about the life in Gilead as it stands right now, but it didn't tell me where it was in June's head. So it was really really strange. I had no idea what to make of it. But anyway, so the episode kind of wraps up with when they're on the farm, the farm hands, who I believe they work for Commander Keys, and I believe they're former eyes. They seem like they have military training. They carry weapons around them at all times. They find another commander who's been wandering around the farm who is really drunk, and obviously they've got to bring him onto the farm and decide what to do with him because they're harboring a ton of handmaids who are on the run and they can't let them leave, so they've got to decide what to do with them. Well, ultimately, at the end of the day, June, this is a really symbolic scene because June basically has them tie his hands up onto like a pike and just let him hang there, and she basically says, well, ladies, his crimes are punishable by death. So she essentially has like a miniature trial in and of itself with just the people on the farm around. And she um says Mrs. Key she finds Mrs. Keys, and she says, gives her a knife and says, "Do me proud." And then Mrs. Keys hacks and slash and kills him, and the episode pretty much ends. She goes up to June in bed. She says, "I love you," and they have like this moment. And it was just like, whoa, holy shit! Like June is just getting darker and darker, which rightfully so, because when you're in times like this, you really have no choice but to do things you wouldn't do otherwise, right? So again, consistently showing the growth that June is, and also showing the potential for June to lead because she empowers other people, including Mrs. Keys. Without June, Mrs. Keys wouldn't. I don't know if she would have been able to do what she had done, which is to essentially serve justice in her eyes. So again, June is empowering other people around her, thus showing her leadership qualities, and that the resistance of Gilead, if it hasn't existed yet, needs her. People need her to lead because they need hope. They need hope, and June can serve as that hope. So, there are some really powerful moments in this episode overall, but like I said, it didn't seem like a whole ton happened. It was like 2 or 3 big plot points overall. They were very powerful, but it's just the quantity of them was pretty small. And before I forget, the other side of this was seeing the aftermath with Commander Lawrence. So obviously, Commander Lawrence at this point, it's assumed that he's just going to be hung on the wall and sentenced to death because it's treason of Gilead. And Nick comes down to he's hanging out in the cell, and Nick comes down to him and says, "I'm here to thank you for your service to Gilead." And basically, Commander Lawrence has this conversation with Nick and says, "Hey, you really think invading Canada is a good idea?" Because what Gilead is basically thinking about doing at this point, since they're harboring the 86 children and 9 Marthas that escaped, is invading Canada and starting a war. And Commander Lawrence is like, "Are you sure you want to do that? Because if you do that, all it's going to do is cause death, when you can just let those 86 plus 9 go, maybe start trade, etc. and so forth," and is filling Nick with these ideas. And a few days later, Nick returns and he says, "All right, come with me." And then he basically reveals, "Hey, Commander Lawrence, we're giving you a second chance. I've convinced the council to let you serve as a consultant." So basically, he spared Commander Lawrence's life, and now Commander Lawrence is going to continue to help Gilead, which I'm not surprised, I guess I could say. I mean, Commander Lawrence is the one who really built Gilead from the ground up. It just makes you wonder about him as a character, because it's like, okay, all of that about him saying that he was going to stick around to clean up his own mess, is he still going to pursue that? Is he putting on a front? It's really hard to see his intentions, but we just know basically from this episode that his life is spared and that we'll get to see him in more, which I really like Commander Lawrence as a character. I think he's interesting, especially since he created the economy of Gilead. So I think that was the right call from a writing perspective, but I'm curious to see where that'll go next as well. So, overall thoughts on the episode, like I said, it was probably one of my least favorite episodes I've watched. However, there was still a lot to love about it. There were some really big plot points. We see June, thank goodness, survive. We see her continue to grow. We see how important she is to the survival of the handmaids and to resisting Gilead by empowering everybody around her. And we also see that Commander Lawrence is spared, and whatever he's going to do in the future, we'll just have to wait and see. But I enjoyed the episode, despite it being one of my least favorite ones. I know it sounds like a contradiction, but I just want to know what you guys think about the episode, season 4, episode 1. Whatever you think, feel free to comment below and let me know your extended thoughts. I'll probably do another video in a few days or about a week until I can get to episode 2. Like I said, I like to watch each of these episodes one at a time with a few days in between to fully marinate and understand what's going on and whatnot, because it's just, to me, it makes my enjoyment of the show more enjoyable. So it's a little bit selfish in that case, but here we are. So, ladies and gentlemen, that'll do it for this episode of Handmaid's Tale Talk. My name's Bryce, and until next time, have a great day.